You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo.
All right, welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I am at Adam Armbrecht, also covering the offseason after a merciful end for the New York Football Giants over on the One Giant podcast with my boy Andy Mack. Doug Norrie taking care of business on the personal side. So I'll be flying solo, but he would want you to know for all of your daily fantasy sports rankings, you head over to DFSR.com, DraftKings, FanDuel. If you need daily projections, they've got you covered. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day, free on all those great platforms. And as we know, it is an exciting 121-119 overtime victory for the Brooklyn Nets at home over the San Antonio Spurs. It's Killer Cam getting the job done for the Brooklyn Nets. Got to be honest with you. It's the kind of game where, because it's an overtime win, because we're going to get to the last second sequence that happened there for one Cam Thomas and then cover the other rookies that got some real run in this game, talk about the superstars, Kevin Durant and James Harden, and a little bit of what went wrong. It's a game you want to be excited about, but it's hard to, because this was one you assumed was ready for a blowout, but never quite got its feet off the ground in that way. A lot of opportunities wasted. But we start where it ended, with 16.1 seconds left on the clock following a defensive rebound and timeout. They have a chance, Steve Nash, the coaching staff, the team, to set up an opportunity for a game-winning play. And in the overtime session, Kevin Durant was 0 of 3, a lot of perimeter looks, 1 in the lane, 2 from the outside. A lot of double teams getting thrown at him, as we've seen a lot of teams do in recent weeks against the Brooklyn Nets, just blitzing the superstars, forcing it out of their hands. We know the struggles they've had with perimeter shooters, other guys being able to pick up the slack. And then the exact same sequence plays out. It's an inbounds play. They get it to Kevin Durant. The double team comes, and it comes off of Cam Thomas's man. And as he said, Cam Thomas in the postgame, it was understood. We want to try to get Kevin Durant a quality look, but if it's my guy that goes for the double team, I need to sprint to that open space and make myself available, which he does, curls around just inside the free throw line, fading little arcer, drops it in. Bob's your uncle, 1.7. Nets are up 2. They close it out with a solid defensive sequence on the inbounds play on Murray on the other end, and they get the win in overtime. And let's stay focused on the positive here. For Cam Thomas, this is a big moment for him. Go back to the draft. Go back to the G League. We understand he's a microwave scorer. We understand that he's already showcased it at the NBA level. But this is a great opportunity in a moment. And we've seen James Harden. We've seen especially Kevin Durant. They've really developed that bond, pushing Cam Thomas, wanting him to take that ball and go make it happen, right? They don't want him to defer. They want him to be the scorer that they know he's capable of being. So in this moment, Kevin Durant makes the right basketball play, and Cam Thomas rewards him. And you know what? Rewards him in a very matter-of-fact kind of way. Cam Thomas is a cool, calm, collected individual on the floor. Got a little grin out of him, but that was about it. And that's because Cam Thomas expects to make those plays. Like that's the type of player that he is. He can be, in his career, an elite offensive talent in the NBA. And that's already where his mindset is. Has a lot of things to develop. The perimeter shot hasn't come yet. The defensive end is another story altogether. But offensively, man, the kid does not shy away from the opportunities. And we said this before. He has the NBA build already. He's capable of taking the contact, of working into the lane, of working in traffic, rising up, finding off-balance looks. He's done it before, and this was an opportunity where he got to do it when it mattered the most, and he came through for the Brooklyn Nets, gives them that ultimate victory. The other piece of it is, just you pull back a little bit, is the idea that Kevin Durant needs to be able to trust Cam Thomas. James Harden needs to be able to trust Cam Thomas. There's other players that you need to be able to put your trust in as well. But at a certain point, when you're in an overtime game and everybody else looks pretty darn gassed, you need to be able to look to someone else to take the big shot. You need to be able to defer at some point. Would anybody have scoffed if Kevin Durant rose up and took a deep three to try to win the game? No, because he's Kevin Durant, and you'll take it every single time. But again, knowing that he had struggled there in that quarter, that you could tell the fatigue was setting in, played 44 minutes, 43 minutes in this one. You could tell it was going to be one of those, yeah, I came up short, didn't quite have my legs left underneath me, etc., if he wasn't able to make that one. So you go to the rookie, he makes the big play, and it's a win for the Nets. That's the positive of it. But by the way, Cam Thomas, again, pretty calm in the postgame, happy to have made the shot, knew what he had to do. You can see Kevin Durant, he just kind of makes his way off the court, unlike in recent weeks when we saw Kevin Durant leading a group of rookies and unexpected victories, or James Harden leading the veterans and doing these things. In the pregame, Steve Nash had talked about this sense of we're just not playing with joy. We're not playing with energy. We're not playing with life, with passion a little bit. And whether that's the lull, right, the give and take, you get Kyrie back the other day. That's a big moment. He does a lot of work to get you a win on the road over the Pacers. But I think, as we've highlighted, that the fatigue factor is real here. And this is the front of a back-to-back. And it's a game, I think, that Kevin Durant, to a man, everyone's going to tell you, shouldn't have been this close. Shouldn't have been in overtime. And we're going to get into a bit of some of the sequences here of what went wrong in this game before ultimately Cam Thomas made it so right. but there were a number of things here that were not going in their favor. Again, it's not because the Spurs were, I think, the 10th position there looking for a play-in game in the playoffs. They were depleted because of the protocols, just like the Nets have gone through, like so many teams have gone through. So it was another reason why you should have been able to come in and handle your business against them. And yet, as we say at the end of the day, you find yourself in overtime looking for someone to step up and make the big play. Going to break down this game, then also get into the rookies as well, because again, Kessler Edwards, Day'ron Sharpe, David Duke Jr., along with Cam Thomas, all got nice little minute shares in this one, and we're starting to get a bigger sample size about how they could possibly contribute to this team in positive and sometimes negative ways. But we'll get there right after, of course, we tell everybody about our friends over at Built Bar. And that's because it's a new year, and with a new year comes new resolutions. Chief among them, get a little bit more fit, feel like you're in a little bit better shape. And you know that I'm a guy that's all about fitness. And when you talk about Built Bar being a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, it does. It's covered in 100% real chocolate, makes it delicious. But what's nice about Built Bar is that it's only 130 calories, just 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a regular candy bar, upwards of 240 calories. The real one is 30 grams of sugar. Good Lord. And dozens of net carbs. No, my friends. Do not risk those carbs. Reach for a Built Bar. And when you go over to Built.com right now, you can use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off on your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off on your order at Built.com. We also remind you to check out Locked On Now. That is the local experts for every team from around the league, providing the insights on all the NBA games, something that is really unique to the Locked On Network because we have every single team covered. It's free, just like our podcast on all those great platforms, so be sure to go and check that out as well. So we dial this thing back, talk about a couple of different aspects of it. The first piece is Kevin Durant, James Harden, right? Now, we know it's an overtime game, but these guys were already earmarked for 38 and 39 minutes, respectively, just playing through 4 quarters. And the real problem is, for me, this is a game you're up 9 at the break. And so you took a little bit of work, but you held the Spurs to 19 points in the second quarter. You put up 28. You get yourself a 9-point cushion. Then you come out and you get absolutely bamboozled, 38 to 31 in the third. The third quarter is supposed to be where you clamp down. The third quarter is supposed to be where you send a very clear and definitive message to the Spurs. Hey, I'm Kevin Durant. I'm James Harden. We're the Brooklyn Nets. You're not coming back in this one. You might as well lay down. And instead, you give away that lead, and you find yourself just up 2 going to the fourth quarter, and then you get into a dogfight. And once you're there, there's no getting away from it. And this isn't about the performances of Kevin Durant or James Harden, because Kevin Durant take away those 3 overtime shots that he missed with the fatigue factor. Not that you can do that, but in regulation, he was 11 of 18 from the field. Knocked down all 5 of his free throws, gave you 6 assists, gave you 3 blocks, gave you 28 points, 26 for James Harden. 12 assists on the day with 7 rebounds, 9 of 18 from the field, right? So they did their job. The problem is when you get inside of the box score on this game, and Harden was a culprit among them, just sloppy basketball. That third quarter had so much blown assignments, wide open perimeter shots for the San Antonio Spurs, turnovers, right? Clunky plays, poor sequences. It had all of the things that have been indicative of the struggles the Nets have had over the last several weeks. It's been brutal. And it really is, it compounds it that, again, you gave up double your second quarter points. And when you go inside the box score on this game, I'd said it at the halftime. At the break, when the Nets were up 9, they had a 16-4 advantage in fast break points over the San Antonio Spurs. They finished the game 20-6. They finished the game 64-60 points in the paint. They finished the game 55-44 rebounding, plus 11 in rebounds. Got to the line 3 more times in the Spurs, knocked down 86% of them. They struggled from beyond the arc. They've been struggling from beyond the arc. But guess what? Some things that I put out on Twitter before this one got started. San Antonio Spurs are 8th in the league in field goal percentage, and they're number 1 in field goal attempts per game. And the Nets struggle to not give up second chance opportunities and to not just be outpaced. 107 attempts. 107 attempts for the San Antonio Spurs in this one. 98 for the Brooklyn Nets. You get outshot by 9 attempts. That's the possibility of 18 points and more if you include 3-pointers, right? That's 18 to 27 points that you could be surrendering just by the volume, because guess what? The Nets outshot the San Antonio Spurs 48-43 from the field, but it doesn't matter when you give up all those extra shot attempts. And the turnover piece was really disgusting. 22 turnovers. And listen, we're going to get to the rookies in a minute, and obviously they do contribute to that. But 6 turnovers for James Harden, 3 turnovers for Kevin Durant. So 9 of your 22 come from your 2 best players. So it's not like this is just happening in a vacuum. The other thing in this game, too, is the rotation piece. And one of the rookies I will touch on here, I don't know what the expectations are for how you want to manage the minutes with the home and road games and not having Kyrie, etc. We saw the value of having him against the Pacers. But Patty Mills played 39 minutes in this one again. He was 5 of 15 from the field and 3 of 12 from beyond the arc. I said it at one point. Patty Mills on the catch and shoots, Patty Mills coming off the curls, running a lot of the similar actions that we think about when Joe Harris is healthy and on the court. That's great. That I'm here for. The thing that I'm not here for is when he gets a little bit trigger happy. And it is such a small little thing. But he came down the floor on a 3-on-1 break with James Harden open under the basket and pulled up for a triple. Like, you have to rein these things in a little bit. And this has been what's been asked of him, is to be hero ball, a lot of these games. But he goes 39 minutes. The starting lineup was Durant, Claxton, Duke Jr., Mills, and Harden. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't start Patty Mills. Maybe that's the trade-off. When you have Kyrie Irving on the road, then you give yourself your opportunity to balance the minutes. So if Patty Mills is playing 30 or 35 in a normal game, okay, because you're only going to play 20 on the road. Maybe and you can even take off a night, some nights on the road when you have Kyrie out there with Harden. Yeah, I'm sure that can be a factor. But this was the kind of game where you shouldn't have had Kevin Durant, James Harden, even Patty Mills needing to play as much as they did. Is it a game where you want Steve Nash to say, if we lose, we lose. We're playing the rookies more? I guess you can do that, but we've already said before, Kevin Durant he's going to play. You're not sitting him down. You're not sitting him down in these games and saying, well, it's a bad Spurs team, and if the rookies can do it, they can do it. And if they can't, so be it. It's never going to happen. But they started out with, as I said, Durant, Claxton, Duke Jr., Mills, and Harden. By the way, Claxton's continuing to grow. He plays 33 minutes in this one. So when we've talked about where is his minute range going to be, obviously no LaMarcus Aldridge in this one, so you had to ask a little bit more of him. The 8 minutes from Blake Griffin, quality, -8 in the plus-minus column. Did have that nice little back-down spin move layup, though, which was a lot of fun. Got the grin from the bench. But Claxton had a really nice run here, 7 of 10 from the field, gave you 14 rebounds in this one and 16 points. I mean, it was a nice game from him. Really solid game from him. Can he give you 30 minutes a night with consistency? And in effect, then reduce what's required of LaMarcus Aldridge and create a little bit more flexibility in the rotations again? I don't know. If he can build towards that, then that also changes the dynamic a little bit. That also alleviates some things. But there were some questions about having Duke Jr. back in the starting lineup. He plays 17 minutes in this one, goes 3 of 6 from the field, 3 of 5, gave you 6 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 block, had a turnover, gave you 6 points, though, plus 12 in the plus-minus category. This is the case to be made for giving a guy a few games, especially a rookie, to try to find his rhythm and get his legs underneath him. Because this was the best game that he's had over these last 3 where he started. And does that mean that I think he's a permanent member of the starting rotation? Obviously not. Would I prefer probably Bembry in there? Sure. But what if you want to use DeAndre Bembry on the road with Kyrie Irving in a starting rotation? And you're trying to figure out what this home unit can look like. If you're going to use more Harden and more Durant at home than you're going to need to on the road, and I just mean from a minute standpoint, I don't mean you're sitting these guys down in favor of Kyrie and saying you go win the games. But if they're going to have to play 38, 39, 40 minutes at home, maybe they can play closer to 30, 32, 33 on the road, right? If that's the goal, then I can understand trying to figure out what you have. And we've said before, Duke Jr. and Bruce Brown and Bembry, they all kind of fall into the same category, right? They can do different types of things on the offensive end. David Duke Jr. with a monster jam in this one. Elevation for the young man. But he can do some things. We know Bruce Brown, the pseudo 5 role, the surprising rebound ability, etc. And Bembry likewise, right? Can slash at the basket, can pick up defensively. Okay. But if they're all kind of in this bag together, there's really no harm in seeing how high of an upside David Duke Jr. can give you. And in this one, I thought the one thing that you can look at with him is ball handling, especially in the home games when you're not going to have Kyrie. Because he can handle it. He can bring it up the court. I'm not telling you he's running the offense, but you only have so many ball handlers on this team, pure ball handlers, right? Durant, Harden, Mills. Where, how far down the list do you go before you say, yeah, we really don't have anybody to bring that ball up the court? David Duke Jr. is good on ball. Okay. We're going to utilize that when we can. He's above Bruce Brown in that regard, you would think. So I thought that was a really nice job by Nash in that regard. And for all the things that we've talked about, what he's doing well or not, and we've taken this long view of eventually when we get down to the end of the season and things start to matter most, we'll see. It'll all, it's all going to work out in the end. And overreacting to the way Nash does things right now can be a little bit fruitless. I will say, when you're experimenting, I'd rather you hang with something that maybe looks like it isn't working a little bit longer rather than bail on it too soon. And that's what I think you saw with David Duke Jr., and it seemed to pay some dividends. You did get into second units that were a little bit interesting, I thought. And I'll specifically mention, because I want to get into the rookies, Kessler Edwards, Day'ron Sharpe. Now we've covered Cam Thomas with his big play. We've covered David Duke Jr. But the other guys that you bring in here are James Johnson and Blake Griffin, 8 minutes apiece. So 16 minutes. And again, you're without LaMarcus Aldridge, so there's minutes right there that you understand you have to get. But you did also play Day'ron Sharpe 11. These guys just don't do anything for me at this point. They really don't. We know that if Blake can try to find his shot again a little bit more, that can certainly turn the tide for him. He's been good defensively. We'll get into later in the week some of the Raptor ratings on these guys, and where once you have Joe Harris back, then things can start to look a little bit different and players can be a little bit more effective. But these guys just do not move the needle for me. And shy of the front end of a back-to-back and not wanting to overtax certain players. That's the only reason that I think you're still seeing these things. And that's where I look at Steve Nash and I don't say, what is he doing with them? I get it. This is more the indication of being a month away from the trade deadline and saying, what do we have on this roster? What are our best available assets? We have some exemptions available to us. What do we need to go get? What is working? What is functional? What can continue to be developed? And what is clearly not going to be effective enough for us where we feel like we need to go do something. And that's why I think you see these little tinkerings and all these little sample sizes. It's to get concrete information about where these players are so you know what you need to accomplish over the next few weeks ahead of the deadline so that you can have the highest level of confidence that you're going to win a championship at the end of the year. And as Doug would tell you over on Twitter, Nets are still the odds-on favorite. And they still have the best, when everyone is 100% healthy, one of the best offensive lineups in the league. And that's going to win the day more often than not. But it doesn't mean you don't want to drill down on some of these fine details. Going to get into the rest of it here, but first, got to tell you about our friends over at BetOnline. That's because they want to wish you a happy new betting year as they continue to keep you covered for all these teams making their marches towards the playoffs. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering in action for 2022. It's a new year and a new updated desktop and mobile website to sign up for. And today, when you do that, you can receive a 50% welcome bonus just for signing up on your first deposit. It's promo code Locked On, and you'll get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit for football, basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. As I say, the other rookies then, and arguably what feeds into the possibility of what the Nets can continue to develop and evolve here. We know it's one Kessler Edwards. But let's talk about Day'ron Sharpe quickly before we do. Because Day'ron Sharpe, I think, is, again, he continues to give you the sample size. No LMA. You need someone to fill the minutes. It's going to be Day'ron Sharpe. He goes 3 of 8 from the field. There's some nice things that he does do. He gives you 6 rebounds. 5 of them are offensive. That is nice. That's second chance opportunities. That's easy putbacks, something that the Nets lack. But he did also pick up 3 personal fouls in 11 minutes. That's the problem right now for him. Right now for him, it's that he just defensively, you saw this on the pick and roll. He seems to get a little bit lost in the sauce there. He ended up pushing. I can't remember who it was offensively for the Spurs, but bumps it into Harden. Harden almost gets a little bit of a tweak or an injury on his hip because he's just a hair late, a step short. He seems a little bit out of place at times and can take a little bit of an extra second to identify his assignment and get on those rotations. He's big. He's physical. He has an NBA body, so that's good, and the Nets can utilize him. But I think this is just a confirmation from a Day'ron Sharpe standpoint that he's not quite there yet. And that may be also, by the way, the reminder for the Brooklyn Nets that, hey, if Blake Griffin is going to be struggling a bit and he's not going to be a part of things, if Millsap's not going to be a part of things, and now you're talking about only having Claxton and LaMarcus Aldridge, then maybe another big body, another defensive player that has some offensive upside, maybe that's something that you need to look out for as the deadline approaches. The other player, though, that got minutes at a more crucial point in the game was Kessler Edwards. Now, let's be clear. He struggled in a couple of areas, did not have his head up on a pass coming from Kevin Durant on the wing. That led to a turnover. He had 2 turnovers in this one. There are some things to be desired. I'm knocking Day'ron Sharpe, but he was a positive in the plus-minus category. Kessler Edwards was a negative again, although I'll give the caveat that he entered the game right at the point when Patty Mills, James Harden, and Kevin Durant all had turnovers unrelated to him. But over 12 minutes of action, in the first 3 minutes that he was in the game, knocked down 2 triples, the thing that the Nets currently lack right now. And he obviously has defensive upside. He can stick with most guys. The switches are a little bit tricky on the smaller guards, but he does a good job. Fouled a shooter on a three-point attempt. These are all things that happen. But I really just, here's a guy that it looks like they're bringing him along somewhat thoughtfully. Again, showed timely rebounds, 3 rebounds, 3 defensive rebounds. So it's nice to see that contribution from him as well. And at a steal plus a block. I mean, that's what you want. You want a guy in 12 minutes of action that gave you 6 points, knocked down 2 triples, and contributed some things on the defensive end as well. Again, he looks like a guy that's just a little half a step away. All these rookies do. All the rookies look like they're just a little half a step away on some things. Cam Thomas, for everything he's doing offensively, he's getting lost on the defensive end. He's leaving some guys wide open, right? But that was a part of what this game looked like. This game looked like a team that was up 14 at one point, and yet somehow we're losing assignments, we're getting confused on switches, we're turning the ball over constantly, and really leaving wide open looks far too often for a team that, listen, you can say whatever you want. It's a depleted roster for sure. But guess what? All these guys can knock down open shots in a gym, and that's what the Nets gave them too much, too consistently. And there's a mixed bag around this when you're playing these different type of rotations and lineups. At one point, there was I'm trying to think, there was a Harden, Thomas, Edwards, Bembry, and Sharp rotation in the fourth quarter. Now, it's twofold here. On the one hand, you think, have we ever seen that before? No. So what level of consistency are you going to get there? It's asking a lot of James Harden potentially, but you kept Thomas on the court. He's a guy, again, that can create for himself. And the one thing that I did like about that, and I'd be curious about, is if you start to use a little bit more Kessler Edwards, now all of a sudden Bembry and Edwards on the floor together in support of, let's say, a Durant, Claxton, and Harden kind of lineup, because Bembry can handle the ball a little bit. Kessler Edwards can handle the ball a little bit. So you're going to go 1 point guard in this positionless basketball. But now all of a sudden you have a couple of slashers. You have one extra player in Edwards that can knock down the perimeter shot. And again, this is all speculative. It's all rotational. When does Patty Mills come into that fold? Patty Mills out on the court with Kessler Edwards and James Harden. What does the second unit look like with LaMarcus Aldridge and Patty Mills? Maybe Edwards has nice value there in the second unit, being able to knock down some perimeter shots, something that they have none of once they get out of their starting 5. But you won't know until you get these sample sizes. And I thought all the rookies gave effort, gave energy, ate up some minutes for you, and gave you this little glimpse of what they're capable of. That's what I'd like to see more of. More of the rookies. Less James Johnson. He does nothing for me. Less James Johnson. We'll talk more about the Raptor ratings later in the week, because there are some things specifically around Blake Griffin. And this is why it's important for this team to get healthy, why it's important to get Kyrie back in the fold here, even on the road games, why it's important to get Joe Johnson back, because Blake Griffin's role and where his value lies is really hard to tap into right now, because he's not knocking down any of his perimeter shots, and you have so few shooters on the court right now. So it really diminishes his value. We'll get into that later in the week, because the next thing we're going to hear about is the post-game, Portland, Kyrie back on the court, and probably needing to put on his boots, put on the hard hat, and go to work, because he got Kevin Durant and James Harden and Patty Mills coming off heavy workload here to get the job done at home. We will, of course, be back again in the post-game. As Doug would always tell you, head over to YouTube, subscribe. We love everyone getting in on the comments section. We really appreciate it. We're pushing ever closer to 1,000 subscriptions. That's the goal. That's the dream. And you can help be a part of that dream. And obviously subscribe, rate, download. We'll do all those good things as well. And by the way, we're talking about putting in the work, right? Doing what's necessary to get the job done. Why? I'm a believer in luck, sure. And I find that the harder I work, the more I have of it. Well, that's Tommy Jefferson, my friends. One of the all-time founding American poets. We'll be back again next time talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.